Get out of my house, you useless brat! The yell ripped through the quiet of San Antonio's east side on that particular night, followed by the jarring sound of a door being slammed shut with such force that the window panes within the frame shuddered. A slender boy stumbled backward onto the frigid concrete of the porch, a well-worn backpack slung precariously over one shoulder. He was Michael Carter, 17 years old, and in that single, brutal instant, he had lost every semblance of home he still possessed. Within the confines of the small, faded blue house, the air hung thick with the mingled scents of cheap beer and palpable fear. Ron Dawson, his stepfather, stood post by the doorway, his cheeks flushed crimson, a half-empty bottle gripped tightly in one hand. The fury etched in his eyes was nothing new. It had become as ingrained in the household as the persistent stains on the couch or the unsightly holes in the drywall that no one bothered to repair. Behind him, observed from the hallway, Michael's mother, Linda Carter, remained frozen, her hand pressed protectively to her chest. Her lips quivered, but no sound escaped them. Fear had long since taken root within her, a silent thief that had gradually stolen her voice, argument by argument. "Ron, please," she managed to whisper, but the remainder of her plea never left her lips. Ron spun towards her, his voice a low, menacing growl. "If you utter another word, you're next." And then it was over. The definitive click of the lock, the ensuing dead silence, the kind that starkly reveals that family is not always a sanctuary. The Texas night enveloped Michael like a harsh penance. The street lay nearly deserted, punctuated only by the monotonous hum of flickering streetlights casting an eerie glow over the cracked pavement and the distant, mournful wail of a siren. He stared intently at the closed door, half expecting it to swing open once more. It remained shut. "This is your final warning, Mike," he recalled Ron's slurred words from earlier that evening. "You keep acting like you're in charge here, but you're just a visitor." Now even that cruel pronouncement felt like an unattainable luxury. Visitors, at least, were welcomed. Michael drew a slow, ragged breath that rasped like sandpaper in his throat. The air carried the scent of motor oil, dust, and the faint, sweet perfume of magnolia blossoms drifting from a nearby yard. This was the Texas air that once signified belonging. He lifted his gaze to the dark, unseeing windows. No one was coming. His mother's silhouette did not appear behind the curtain. For a fleeting moment, a powerful urge to cry out her name surged within him. But pride, or perhaps the crushing weight of heartbreak, stifled the impulse. His chest burned, his hands trembled. The world seemed overwhelmingly vast, utterly indifferent. Then, from somewhere deep within, a quiet voice, his own, murmured, "Don't cry. You're not a child anymore." He adjusted the backpack, swinging it onto both shoulders, and began to walk. He passed the mailbox with its peeling paint, the garish neon glow of the gas station where he used to buy his mother's cigarettes. He walked past a world that had already deemed him insignificant. Far off in the distance, thunder rumbled across the Texas sky. A storm was brewing. The first drops of rain struck his face, mingling with the tears he had vowed not to shed. Inside the small blue house, Linda finally sank to her knees. She too had heard the door slam. The silence that followed was more agonizing than any outburst, but fear, guilt, and shame held her captive. "God, please watch over him," she whispered, her words lost to the night. She made no move. Further down the street, a lone streetlight flickered and died, plunging Michael into deeper shadow. He pulled his jacket tighter, continuing his trek toward the park, unaware that another figure was already traversing those very same streets. A man, simply clad, his steps quiet, his eyes radiating a gentle light. Before the night concluded, their paths would intersect, and what had begun as an act of profound cruelty would ultimately mark the genesis of a miracle. By the time Michael reached Travis Park, the digital clock above the adjacent bank already displayed 2:04 in the morning. The rain had subsided to a fine mist, the kind that clings persistently to the skin and lends a shimmering quality to everything beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. The distant downtown skyline stood like silent, indifferent sentinels. Michael's sneakers squelched with each step, his jeans clinging uncomfortably to his legs. He had no destination, no one to contact. The city, which usually thrummed with life during the day, now resembled an alien landscape. A cold, desolate iteration of San Antonio, where every shadow concealed either peril or memory. He stepped onto the small stone pathway leading into the park. The grass was slick, the benches uninvitingly cold. The ancient oak trees loomed like uncaring guardians. He located an unoccupied bench near the park's center, positioned beneath the weathered statue of a Civil War soldier, a figure long since overlooked. Dropping his soaked backpack at his feet, he sat, hunching forward, shivering. In the distance, a siren wailed, its mournful sound echoing through the sleeping metropolis. A dog barked, then another. A taxi glided past the corner, its headlights momentarily illuminating the park before vanishing back into the darkness. The instant the light receded, the surrounding gloom felt more oppressive than before. Michael unzipped his bag. Inside lay a tattered notebook, 2 school textbooks, and a small photograph, its edges creased from a summer fair long past. The image depicted a man with joyous eyes hoisting a young boy onto his shoulders, both beaming, cotton candy clutched in their hands. His father. The memory struck with a force more potent than the physical cold. His father had passed away when Michael was 12, a sudden heart attack at the factory. One moment he was there, the next, he was gone. Linda, his mother, had been devastated. And the man who had subsequently entered their lives, promising protection, had instead become the relentless, unending storm. Michael brushed a droplet of rain from the photograph and whispered into the night, "Why did you leave, Dad? You would have stopped him. You wouldn't have let this happen." The only reply was the soft hiss of passing cars on the wet asphalt and the rustling of leaves. He leaned back against the bench, gazing upwards. The clouds were beginning to fracture, revealing a handful of faint stars, distant and fragile, much like hope itself. His stomach rumbled, but hunger was the least of his immediate concerns. What truly gnawed at him was the profound humiliation, the vivid image of Ron's inebriated face, and the crushing weight of his mother's silence. He retrieved his notebook, turned to a blank page, and began to write with the stub of a pencil. "Tonight I lost my mother. Tonight I learned love has its limits. Tonight I became no one." He stared at the words until the letters swam before his eyes. His eyes burned, but he refused to yield to tears. Crying was a sign of weakness, Ron had always insisted. Yet, deep down, Michael knew the truth. Not crying was slowly destroying him. Across town, in that same modest blue house, Linda sat awake on the edge of her bed, listening to the rain patter against the window pane. Her hands were clasped tightly around a folded photograph of her son. Every fiber of her being yearned to rush out into the night, to find him, to apologize. But fear whispered louder than love. He's safer away from Ron, she told herself, though the conviction was absent from her own belief. Back in the park, a gust of wind swept through, carrying with it the earthy scent of damp soil and something else, a faint yet palpable warmth. Michael pulled his jacket tighter, glancing around. No one was visible. Still, for a fleeting instant he thought he detected the sound of footsteps, measured and steady, emanating from behind the statue. He rubbed his eyes, attributing the sensation to exhaustion. Perhaps it was the wind or mere imagination. Nevertheless, the lingering impression persisted that he was no longer entirely alone. The clock on the bank's facade flickered to 2:18 a.m. The city seemed to exhale, and somewhere just beyond the halo of the nearest streetlight, a quiet figure cloaked in simple, earth-toned fabric continued walking toward the park, toward the boy who had just written that he was nobody. The park was now almost completely silent, save for the low hum of a street lamp and the gentle whisper of the wind weaving through the wet foliage. Michael remained motionless on the bench, his eyes half closed, his body trembling with sheer exhaustion. His fingers tightly clutched the strap of his backpack, as if it were his only anchor. Somewhere between wakefulness and slumber, the night began to dissolve into a hazy blur. Then, he heard it. Footsteps, slow and rhythmic, barely disturbing the profound hush of the early morning. He sat up straighter, a knot of instinct tightening in his chest. No one was typically seen traversing Travis Park at this hour. The homeless sought refuge elsewhere after midnight, and the inebriated gravitated to different haunts. Yet the steps continued, unhurried and calm, as if the walker possessed an unfaltering knowledge of their destination. Emerging from the encroaching darkness, a figure materialized. A man of medium stature, clad in a long, earth-toned cloak that swayed gently with the breeze. The street lamp behind him cast a faint, luminous outline, as if he emanated light from within. His hair, dark and shoulder-length, was complemented by a neat, unassuming beard. He seemed out of time, almost otherworldly. Michael's pulse quickened. "Hey, who are you?" he called out, his voice strained. The man did not respond immediately. He halted a few steps away, meeting the boy's gaze with eyes that were both deep and serene, eyes that didn't intrude but seemed to comprehend. "I saw you sitting here alone," the man finally stated, his voice remarkably calm, low and warm, reminiscent of a tranquil Sunday morning. "I thought perhaps you might welcome some company." Michael's jaw tightened. "I don't need anything," he stated curtly. The man offered a faint smile. "That's quite all right. Sometimes saying we need nothing is simply another way of expressing that we've been hurt too deeply." The words resonated within Michael's chest like a silent chime. He felt an urge to avert his gaze, but found himself unable to. There was no hint of menace in the man's posture, no trace of pity or judgment, only a profound sense of presence. The man turned slightly, gesturing to the empty space beside him on the bench. "May I sit?" Michael hesitated for a moment, then gave a subtle nod. The man sat at the far end, maintaining a comfortable distance. Silence settled between them once more, but this time it felt different, less empty, more profound. After a brief pause, the man looked upward towards the sky. "Cold night, isn't it?" Michael merely shrugged. "I've endured worse." The wind picked up again, sending a shiver down Michael's spine. Without a word, the man removed his cloak, a simple, light-colored garment with frayed edges, and offered it to Michael. "Here," he said. "I'm accustomed to the cold." Michael frowned, shaking his head. You don't even know me. The man's gaze remained steady. I don't need to know you to care that you are cold. For a long moment, Michael remained still. His pride urged him to refuse, but his hands moved almost independently, reaching out for the cloak. The warmth that enveloped him was unexpected. It wasn't merely physical. It was a profound sense of comfort, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Thanks, he mumbled. The man nodded, a gentle smile gracing his lips. What is your name? Michael. A beautiful name, the man commented. Do you know what it means? Michael shook his head. It means, who is like God? Michael raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. And you are? You can call me Jesus, the boy blinked. Yeah, right, he said, a small, nervous laugh escaping him. Funny name, the man chuckled softly. It's not that uncommon, he added. But names are not what truly matter. He looked up again at the sky, where the clouds were finally beginning to part, allowing faint streaks of dawn light to filter through. What matters is that even in the darkest hours, someone walks beside you. Michael followed his gaze. The stars were faint, but undeniably present. He offered no verbal response, but a subtle loosening occurred in his chest, an easing of the ache that finally allowed him to breathe freely. They sat there side by side, as the city began to stir in the distance. For the first time since being cast out, Michael did not feel invisible. And though he couldn't fully comprehend the reason, he knew with certainty that this encounter was no accident. Some meetings, after all, are not mere coincidences. They are divine invitations. The wind had subsided, leaving behind only the faint whisper of passing vehicles and the soft rustle of the jacaranda branches overhead. A thin wisp of mist still lingered above Travis Park, casting a pale, silvery sheen over the benches. Beneath one of them sat Michael, enveloped in the borrowed cloak, which still retained a subtle warmth, as if the fabric itself remembered the hands that had given it. For an extended period, neither he nor the stranger uttered a word. Jesus simply sat, his gaze fixed on the city's distant, faint glow. There was a disarming quality to his stillness. He did not fidget, nor did he attempt to fill the silence with superficial comfort. He simply existed. When Michael finally spoke, his voice cracked midway through his sentence. He said I was nothing, that I ruin everything I touch. Jesus turned to him, his eyes deep, yet gentle. And you believed him? Michael clenched his fists. I didn't want to, but when your own mother doesn't say a word to defend you. He trailed off, his throat constricting. It's hard not to. The man offered no argument. He simply allowed the words to hang in the air, heavy but safe, like nascent storm clouds poised to unleash their fury. Michael's shoulders began to tremble. Have you ever been so angry it feels like your chest is on fire? Yes, Jesus replied quietly. Many times. What did you do? I wept. The answer struck Michael silent. Wept. The word felt alien, almost forbidden. Ron had always told him that men did not cry, that tears were a sign of weakness, that pain should be buried deep within. Jesus leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. Tears are not weakness, Michael. They are the body's way of saying, I am still alive. Michael shook his head, attempting to swallow the lump forming in his throat. If I start, I won't stop. Then don't stop, Jesus said softly. Let it fall. The pain that remains inside will corrupt your soul. let it go. That was the moment the dam finally broke. A single tear fell, then another, until his vision became a blurred mess. Years of suppressed anger, humiliation, and fear poured out all at once. His body shook as quiet sobs escalated into full-blown cries. He pressed his hands to his face, a wave of shame washing over him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm such a mess." But Jesus did not tell him to cease. He did not offer a tissue or a lecture. Instead, he reached out and gently placed a steady hand on Michael's shoulder. It was a touch so profoundly calm, it seemed to silence the entire world around them. "It's all right," he murmured. "Even I wept for those I loved, for those who suffered, for the lost. Tears are sacred, Michael. They signify that your heart has not turned to stone." From across the street, the red neon glow of a diner sign pulsed intermittently through the rain, casting brief flashes of light across their faces. Two silhouettes bound by an invisible thread. Miles away, within the confines of the small blue house, Linda remained perched on the edge of her bed, unable to find sleep. Her hands trembled as she clutched her son's old t-shirt to her face. She longed to believe that somewhere out there, God was cradling him as she had failed to. Back in the park, Michael's sobs gradually subsided. The cool air stung his tear-streaked cheeks, but the heavy weight in his chest had noticeably lightened. He inhaled deeply, for the first time in what felt like days. "I don't even understand why you care," he finally said, his voice small. Jesus smiled faintly. "Because you matter. Because no one should have to cry alone." They sat there as the first pale fingers of dawn began to stretch across the horizon. The world remained bruised and broken, but for the first time, Michael felt truly seen, not as a burden, not as a mistake, but as a boy worth saving. High above them, a single ray of morning sunlight pierced through the clouds, resting gently upon his tear-stained face. And in that fragile luminescence, the impossible suddenly seemed within reach. That perhaps, just perhaps, God had been listening all along. The initial rays of dawn stretched across Travis Park, transforming the damp pavement into a shimmering expanse of liquid gold. Birds began their tentative chorus, and the air carried the faint, mingled scents of coffee and exhaust from the awakening city. On the bench, Michael stirred beneath the cloak that had provided him warmth throughout the night. The tangible warmth had dissipated, but the memory of it lingered. The stranger in the light-colored cloak, Jesus, sat a few feet away, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if deciphering a message written solely for him in the unfolding sunrise. When he turned towards Michael, his expression conveyed neither pity nor surprise, only a quiet, unshakable certainty. "You should go," he said gently. "School starts soon." Michael blinked, feeling disoriented. "What? Roosevelt High?" Jesus continued. "Do you have classes today?" The boy frowned, rubbing his eyes. How do you even know where I go to school?" Jesus offered that calm, unhurried smile, the one that always seemed to possess more understanding than words could convey. "Let's just say I know where you belong." Michael glanced down at his dirt-stained hands, his rumpled clothes. "I can't possibly show up like this," he murmured. "They'll just laugh at me." "Perhaps," Jesus conceded. "Or perhaps they will see someone braver than they could ever imagine being." He rose to his feet, brushing a speck of dust from the hem of his robe. "Courage isn't always loud, Michael. Sometimes it's simply the act of walking back into the world that tried its best to break you." Michael stared at the ground, caught in a maelstrom of disbelief and exhaustion. He yearned to retreat back into the darkness, to simply disappear. But something in those simple, steady words had taken root within him. Jesus reached into the folds of his cloak and handed Michael a bottle of water. "Drink," he instructed. "Wash your face at the fountain over there." Michael hesitated, then accepted the bottle. The water was cold, sharp, invigorating. When he splashed it onto his face, it stung his eyes awake. The boy reflected in the water was no longer a lost cause, but a survivor determined to stand. By the time they reached the bus stop on Street Mary Street, the sun had fully ascended. Commuters bustled past, their eyes fixed on their mobile devices, oblivious to the two figures waiting quietly side by side. One clad in a hoodie, the other in a robe that seemed to belong to a bygone era. The bus arrived with a soft hiss of its brakes. Michael turned to Jesus. "You're not coming with me, are you?" Jesus gently shook his head. "This part of the journey, you must walk alone. But remember, alone does not mean abandoned." Michael felt a strong impulse to protest, to bombard him with a dozen questions, but an inner voice urged him to refrain. Instead, he nodded slowly, clutching the strap of his backpack. "Thanks for the night, for everything." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already possessed the strength. You simply needed to be reminded of it." The bus doors creaked open. Michael climbed aboard, taking a seat by the window. When he looked back, the man was still standing there. Sunlight outlined his figure like a halo of fire. For a fleeting second, Michael thought he perceived something, an impossible light shimmering beneath his skin. But then the bus pulled away, and the figure dissolved into the brilliant glare of the morning. At Roosevelt High, students thronged the courtyard, their laughter and shouts echoing, living lives seemingly untouched by his particular brand of pain. Michael moved among them like a phantom, his hoodie pulled low, his stomach churning, yet each step felt like a hard-won victory. Inside a second-floor classroom, Miss Sanchez, the literature teacher, was preparing for her first period class when her gaze drifted out the window. She observed a boy crossing the yard, his head bowed, his shoes still damp from the night's rain. Something in his posture, a striking blend of weariness and quiet defiance, caused her to pause. Michael, that morning, was unaware that he was being observed. Unaware that someone would soon become another crucial thread in the unfolding miracle that had begun in the park. All he knew was that he was walking into school with nothing left to his name except the nascent courage that a stranger had planted within him, like a seed that refused to wither and die. The bell at Roosevelt High rang precisely at 8 a.m., its sharp tone slicing through the cacophony of the hallways. Students streamed in, clutching their iced coffees, exchanging inside jokes, and lamenting their homework assignments. To them, it was simply another Monday. But for Michael Carter, it was a battlefield. Every footstep seemed to echo too loudly. Every glance felt like an intrusive spotlight. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unwashed, and the dark circles beneath his eyes told tales that no one seemed eager to hear. He slipped into his first period classroom just a minute before the tardy bell. Miss Elena Sanchez, the English teacher, looked up from her attendance roster. She was a woman in her mid-40s, her kind face framed by loose curls, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. Years of teaching had honed her ability to perceive subtle details, the slight slump of a student's shoulders, the tremor in a hand, the particular brand of silence that signaled pain rather than shyness. "Good morning, Michael," she greeted softly. He offered a brief nod, avoiding her gaze, and retreated to a seat in the back corner. The class droned on about symbolism in The Outsiders, but Michael's mind remained elsewhere. His stomach ached from hunger. His fingers tapped restlessly against the desk, keeping time with the rhythmic memory of the previous night's rain. Midway through the lesson, Miss Sanchez's voice faltered. She was expounding on a passage about finding kinship, about discovering a family untethered to bloodlines, when a flicker in her peripheral vision drew her gaze back to him. The boy sat in a stupor, his writing implement motionless, the cuffs of his hoodie damp, and his notebook bore smudges of dirt near its edges. Following the conclusion of the lesson, as his classmates made a hasty exit, she softly called out, "Michael, could you remain for a moment?" He froze, his instincts urging an immediate departure to evade interrogation. Yet the gentle, non-accusatory timbre of her voice gave him pause. Once the door had swung shut, she settled onto the nearest desk, lowering her voice. "You were absent from class today without your essay, and you appear utterly drained. Are you well?" Michael managed a nod. "I'm all right. I simply didn't get any sleep." Her expression softened. Had he not slept, or had he lacked a place to do so? The inquiry pierced his defenses. His throat constricted. He longed to fabricate a story, to attribute his state to mere stress or a sleepless night. But then, the words of Jesus came to mind. Courage isn't always vociferous. Sometimes it merely entails re-entering the very environment that caused you pain. His lips quivered. "My stepfather evicted me," he whispered. "I slept in the park." Miss Sanchez blinked, her breath catching in her chest. She had encountered similar narratives before, but hearing one from a student who had never once raised his voice in class felt profoundly different. Instinctively, she reached for his hand. "Michael, listen to me. This is not your doing." "None of it is." Tears threatened to well in his eyes, but she prevented the moment from engulfing him in shame. "You are safe here," she assured him. "We will ensure you receive the help you need. Do you have faith in me?" He hesitated, then gave a single nod. Within minutes, Miss Sanchez was conferring with Mr. Adrian Gomez, the school counselor, in his office. A call was placed to Child Protective Services and the San Antonio Youth Shelter Network. Documentation was processed, and case identifiers were assigned. The very system that frequently operated with agonizing slowness seemed to accelerate remarkably that day. By lunchtime, Michael found himself in the counselor's office, holding a sandwich and a paper cup of juice. He didn't fully grasp the unfolding events, only that individuals were now actively supporting him. In an adjacent room, Miss Sanchez leaned against a wall, phone to her ear, detailing specifics to a social worker. "He's a quiet, respectful student, an honor roll recipient. He simply slipped through the cracks." The voice on the other end responded, "We will accommodate him in a temporary shelter this evening. He will have a bed, meals, and access to counseling." When Miss Sanchez rejoined Michael, he looked up, a fragile glimmer of hope in his eyes. She offered a smile, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You are not returning to that residence. Not tonight. You will be taken somewhere secure." His chest rose with a shaky exhalation. For the first time in a considerable period, he believed her. Outside, the Texan sun had ascended high above the city. The cacophony of honking cars, the laughter of students, the world continued its relentless rotation. But within that confined office, a quiet miracle had transpired. Not one marked by thunder or celestial radiance, but by individuals acting with integrity. Educators, counselors, strangers, each unknowingly becoming instruments of a higher power. And somewhere beyond the window, as Michael was escorted from the school towards a waiting van. A man clad in a light cloak stood beneath the trees, observing silently, a barely perceptible smile gracing his lips. The van departed Roosevelt High just as the sun began its descent behind the city's skyline. For a fleeting few minutes, the cityscape glowed gold before yielding to the encroaching twilight. From the back seat, Michael watched as streetlights flickered to life one by one, his own reflection staring back at him through the glass. A mud-stained hoodie, weary eyes, an expression caught between apprehension and disbelief. "The social worker driving, Miss Rivera," she spoke softly, her voice barely audible above the traffic's drone. "It's called Hope House," she explained. "It's not far, just a few miles from the city center. They welcome teenagers who require a secure refuge. You will be provided with meals, a bed, and individuals to converse with. You are no longer alone. Understand?" Michael offered no reply. The phrase, "safe place," sounded ephemeral, almost fantastical. He had previously heard adults make such assurances. Typically, these were followed by discord. Nevertheless, a certain sincerity in Miss Rivera's tone was substantial enough to prevent him from fleeing when they arrived in front of a two-story dwelling painted yellow, adorned with a wooden sign bearing blue lettering. Hope House, a sanctuary for new beginnings. Warm illumination spilled from the windows. Through the open doorway emanated the comforting aromas of chili and cornbread. Inside, echoes of laughter could be heard from down the corridor. For a moment, Michael stood rooted to the sidewalk, his backpack clutched tightly, too hesitant to take a step forward. Then, a woman materialized in the doorway. Alejandra Torres, the residence coordinator. In her early 30s, her hair pulled back, her gaze steady yet compassionate. "You must be Michael," she said, extending a hand. "Come in, sweetheart. Welcome home." Home. The word resonated more profoundly than she could have imagined. He stepped across the threshold. The entrance hall walls were adorned with photographs depicting smiling young faces at picnics, graduations, and festive holiday gatherings. Each image was accompanied by a date inscribed beneath. Each a testament that this establishment was more than a mere refuge. It was an opportunity for a fresh start. Alejandra led him through a brief tour. The common room, furnished with well-worn sofas and a softly humming television. The kitchen, redolent with the scents of cinnamon and detergent. The shared sleeping quarters upstairs. "You will be in room 3B, she informed him. "You will share it with 3 other commendable individuals. You will meet them during dinner." Upstairs, Luis, a tall youth with closely cropped hair and a playfully mischievous smile, peered out from the room's entrance. "New arrival?" he inquired. "Indeed," Alejandra confirmed. "Behave yourselves," Luis grinned. "Always do." Within the room, 3 bunk beds occupied the walls. Posters of basketball stars and a hastily affixed dream board adorned the space. It was not opulent, but it pulsed with life, a vibrant tapestry of color, amiable disarray, and the subtle resonance of belonging. "Top or bottom?" Luis asked. Michael hesitated. "Bottom is fine." "Excellent choice. Easier when the nightmares strike," Luis commented casually, then offered a wink. At dinner, the dining area buzzed with vibrant energy, spoons clinking against plates, teasing banter between individuals, the pervasive aroma of freshly baked bread filling the air. Mariana, a demure girl with dark, curly hair, passed him the salt. Valerie, radiating an air of defiance and adorned with eyeliner, posed the question, "So, what's your narrative, newcomer?" Before Alejandra directed a look at her that clearly communicated, "Not tonight." Michael managed a faint smile. I suppose I'm embarking on a new chapter. They nodded in unison, as if a shared understanding existed, for indeed it did. Every young person at that table had experienced adversity, and each was in the process of rediscovering how to rebuild. Later, after the lights were extinguished, Michael lay on his bunk, gazing at the ceiling. The house settled around him with gentle creaks, filled with the sounds of sleeping strangers who, inexplicably, already felt like kin. The blanket carried the scent of detergent and something else. Solace, perhaps. Down the corridor, Alejandra closed her office door and inscribed his name on the whiteboard beneath the heading, New Arrivals. Below it, she added a single, concise observation in small lettering. Quiet, polite, possesses tremendous potential. Outside, the wind carried faint urban sounds, distant sirens, bursts of laughter, the rumble of far-off trains. But within Hope House, a profound stillness had settled. For the first time in months, Michael did not succumb to sleep consumed by apprehension. He did not implore for morning to arrive or wish the night away. He simply breathed, enveloped in a borrowed tranquility. And somewhere out there, beneath the same Texan sky, Jesus meandered past the yellow dwelling, glanced up at its illuminated windows, and whispered the very same word emblazoned above the entrance. Hope. Mornings at Hope House commenced with the comforting aroma of pancakes and the gentle hum of an antiquated radio in the kitchen. Though the outside world might persist in its chaos, within those ochre walls, order maintained its own serene cadence. Breakfast, household duties, educational pursuits, therapeutic sessions, supper, bedtime, a fragile framework of routine meticulously holding together the fractured fragments of young lives. For Michael, this rhythm initially felt peculiar, almost disingenuous, akin to mimicking existence before rediscovering its essence. Yet, gradually, the predictability evolved into something sacred. Each morning, as Alejandra sounded the bell for breakfast, it served as a reminder. You have navigated another day. He commenced keeping a journal, a gift from Alejandra, on his third night there. On the inaugural page, he had inscribed but a single sentence, I am still here. By week's end, the pages overflowed with paragraphs, raw, unpolished, tarnished expressions flowing between assignments in mathematics, homework, and notes from therapy. Some days, he wrote of longing for his mother. On others, he recounted the encounter with the stranger in the park, who had assured him it was acceptable to weep. Each entry began to sound less like a chronicle of survival and more like a testament to recovery. At school, Miss Sanchez ensured the faculty were fully informed. Michael was granted extensions and afforded ample space. Not pity, but unwavering patience. He began staying after class to assist her with tasks such as stacking books or wiping down the whiteboard. When she smiled and remarked, "You are rapidly catching up," he realized that he hadn't received a compliment in years. Every Thursday afternoon, Hope House organized group therapy sessions in a brightly lit room that faintly smelled of lavender and aged markers. The young participants occupied a circle, Luis restlessly adjusting his shoelaces, Val feigning disinterest. Mariana meticulously sketched in her notebook. The therapist, Mr. David, spoke with quiet precision. "Let us contemplate control," he initiated one session. "What aspects can we truly influence?" Luis interjected with a jest. Val rolled her eyes, but when Michael's turn arrived, he astonished himself. "I cannot alter what he inflicted upon me," he stated softly. "However, I can determine how I respond to it." A hushed silence fell upon the room. Even Val ceased her pretense of indifference. Following the therapy session, Mr. David distributed small grounding exercises designed to reintegrate them into the present moment when intrusive memories threatened to overwhelm them. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, he instructed. Document 3 things you observe presently: what you see, hear, feel. Michael diligently practiced these techniques at night, when recollections resurfaced. Thus, when sleep eluded him, he would sit by the window, observing the distant city lights, repeating the numbers under his breath until a sense of calm permeated him. The staff referred to this as trauma processing, but for the youth, it was simply the endeavor of relearning how to live. Days transitioned into weeks. His academic performance improved. He joined the school's volunteer club, assisting in the sorting of food donations at the local food bank. One afternoon, Alejandra observed him guiding a new resident through the house, explaining the regulations with a quiet self-assurance. "You have a knack for assisting the younger ones," she remarked to him later. Michael offered a shrug. "I simply recall what it's like to be new." "That is precisely why you will assist others in the future," she declared. That evening, he resumed writing in his journal. "They consistently assert my strength. I do not perceive myself as strong, but perhaps strength is not a sensation. It is the continuous act of perseverance, even when one is fatigued." Across town, Linda Carter sat in her apartment, tracing the lines of a sentence she had transcribed from a letter. Alejandra had dispatched a progress report to her. Tears welled in her eyes. For the first time, she perceived a flicker of hope inscribed in her son's handwriting. Back at Hope House, the lights gradually dimmed. In the pervasive quiet, Alejandra conducted her nightly rounds, peeking into each room. As she reached Michael's door, she observed him asleep, his pen still clasped in his hand, his journal open upon his chest. She smiled and extinguished the lamp. The page beneath his hand bore the inscription, "Perhaps healing is not about forgetting what transpired. Perhaps it is about inscribing a new narrative over the existing one." Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the branches of the trees. Somewhere beyond the streetlights, Jesus once again walked by, observing through the window as the boy slept. This time, no words were necessary. The miracle was already in motion. One page, one breath, one act of quiet fortitude at a time. It had been nearly 2 months since Michael Carter arrived at Hope House. 2 months punctuated by routines, therapy sessions, and tentative laughter that bordered on peace. He was learning to exist free from fear, to interpret alarms as signals of mourning rather than impending danger, to believe that doors could close softly. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, while he was assisting Alejandra with unloading groceries, the phone in the front office rang. The volunteer stationed at the desk called out, "It's for you, Miss Torres." Line 2. It's a woman inquiring about Michael Carter. Alejandra's hand paused mid-air, hovering over a bag of apples. Did she state her name? Yes. Linda Carter. For an instant, the sounds of the world seemed to recede. The rustling of paper bags, the refrigerator's low hum, all faded into the distance. Alejandra took the call in her office, closing the door behind her. "Mrs. Carter, this is Alejandra Torres from Hope House," she began. Her voice maintained a professional tone, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. On the other end, Linda's voice trembled. Is my son all right? They informed me he was placed with you. I need to see him." Alejandra leaned back in her chair, meticulously selecting her words. "He is safe, Mrs. Carter. He has been making considerable progress, attending school, participating in his therapy. He is strong. I know, Linda replied quietly. He always was. I wasn't. A prolonged silence ensued. Then I left. Ron, I filed a restraining order. I am currently in counseling. I have been clean for 32 days. I understand that doesn't erase my past actions, but I must tell him I am truly sorry. Please, may I see my son? Alejandra exhaled slowly. Allow me to speak with him first. If he is amenable, we can arrange a supervised visit. That evening, as she knocked on Michael's door, he was seated at his desk, completing a journal entry. May we converse for a moment? She inquired. He looked up, his eyes wary. Did I do something amiss? No, sweetheart, she said, offering a gentle smile. But I received a telephone call today from your mother. The pencil in his hand snapped. She wishes to see you, Alejandra continued. Only if you desire to. There is no obligation. We can arrange it here, with my presence. Michael's chest tightened, his words becoming ensnared behind his teeth. She abandoned him? Yes, Alejandra affirmed. She is seeking assistance. He stood, pacing the confined space, his heart pounding erratically. She witnessed him eject me. She did nothing. I understand, Alejandra said softly. And you are under no obligation to forgive her, but perhaps you owe yourself the opportunity to ascertain if she has changed. That night, sleep proved elusive. In the darkness, Michael could still vividly recall the stark illumination of the porch light, the resounding slam of the door, the silhouetted form of his mother behind the curtain. He remembered every second of that silence, a silence that inflicted more pain than any physical blow. Yet another recollection followed. The voice of Jesus, calm and steady beneath the expanse of the Travis Park stars. Forgiveness is not for their benefit. It is for yours, so that your heart does not become corrupted by what they have done. He turned that sentiment over in his mind until the advent of morning. The following day, he found Alejandra in the kitchen. You may contact her, he stated quietly. I will see her, just once. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Word circulated discreetly throughout the residence. The other youths feigned indifference to gossip, but even Val displayed a softened demeanor upon hearing the news. Brave move, man, she commented. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Linda arrived at Hope House, clutching a small purse and trembling so violently that she nearly dropped her keys. Her face appeared thinner, her eyes rimmed with the effects of sleeplessness, yet they held a clarity. She resembled a woman who had endured a prolonged storm for years and had finally emerged into the light. In the designated visitor's room, Alejandra guided Michael to his seat, then offered him a reassuring nod before stepping aside. The instant Linda beheld her son, tears welled forth. You've grown taller, she whispered. You bear a striking resemblance to your father. Michael offered no smile. He merely studied her. The same eyes, the same voice, now imbued with a tremor of regret. I do not anticipate your forgiveness, she stated. I simply need you to comprehend. I lived in fear every single day, and I was wrong. You did not merit what I permitted to occur. For a considerable duration, Michael remained silent. Then, at length, he spoke, not with animosity, but with a quiet strength. I am not prepared to forgive you, he declared. However, I am ready to listen. Linda nodded, her tears flowing freely. That is far more than I deserve. Thank you. From the doorway, Alejandra observed, tears blurring her vision. She understood that healing was not a singular event. It was a succession of small, hesitant steps taken back toward the light. Outside, the sun began its descent over San Antonio. Somewhere beyond the ochre walls of Hope House, Jesus walked once more, a faint smile gracing his lips as two wounded hearts commenced, however tentatively, to find their path homeward. Friday afternoon, sunlight streamed through the windows of the Hope House visitation room, casting a golden hue upon the faded rug. The air carried a subtle scent of coffee and cleaning solution. On the small, circular table between them sat 2 paper cups of tea, untouched, cooling with the passage of time. Michael Carter sat upright, his hands clasped tightly beneath the table. Across from him, his mother, Linda, fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. A dense silence permeated the space between them, heavy with the weight of all the lost years. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she began, her voice trembling. "I didn't anticipate you would." Michael's gaze flickered upward, guarded, but devoid of hardness. "I nearly didn't," she nodded, absorbing the censure she fully deserved. "I understand. You owe me nothing." "No," he replied, his tone calm yet resolute. "I don't. But there are things I need to express, and I require you to listen." Alejandra stood quietly near the door, present solely for support. She had learned that certain resolutions to past pain necessitated allowing sorrow to speak without interruption, without the urge to mend it. Michael's voice was initially low, tinged with uncertainty. But then, the dam of his restrained emotions broke. "You watched him throw me out. Mom, you stood there. You heard him. You saw me crying on the porch, and you just let it happen." Linda's face crumpled. "I know. I was terrified. I thought if I said anything, he would harm you or me. I froze." "You froze every single time," he said sharply, leaning forward. "Every time he yelled. Every time he struck the wall. Every time I implored you to leave. You did not protect me." His words landed like heavy stones. Linda did not avert her gaze. For once, she offered no defense. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You are correct." Michael's hands trembled. "Do you comprehend the experience of being 17 years old, standing in the rain, believing your own mother prioritized a man over you?" His throat constricted. "I kept hoping you would open the door." "You never did." Linda pressed her palms together. "I wanted to. I swear I wanted to, but I was broken as well. I lacked the capacity to fight for anyone. Not even myself." "Then you should have allowed me to leave," he said quietly. "Instead, you permitted him to obliterate what remained of us." For an extended period, the sole sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Linda wiped her face, her voice cracking as she said, "I left him, Michael. I am seeking help. I am participating in a support group for survivors. I cannot rectify the past, but I wish to construct something better, if you will permit me." He did not respond immediately. He gazed out the window where the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in bruised hues of pink and violet. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I am not ready to forgive you. Not yet. But I am finished carrying this like poison within me." Linda looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "That is all I had hoped for, that you would cease allowing my mistakes to inflict pain upon you." He nodded. "That is why I am here, to articulate all that I was unable to before. I am not here to alleviate your suffering. I am here to achieve freedom." Alejandra stepped forward, her tone gentle. "That is what healing manifests as. Michael articulating the truth and allowing it to rest where it rightfully belongs." Linda reached for his hand, but stopped midway. "May I embrace you?" Michael hesitated. His body tensed at the prospect, then slowly relaxed. "Not today," he stated. "Perhaps someday." A single tear traced a path down Linda's cheek, yet she offered a genuine, fragile smile. "Someday is more than I deserve. Thank you for this day." As she stood to depart, Michael exhaled deeply, a peculiar lightness filling the void where resentment had resided. Not peace, not yet, but something akin to it. Outside, the late afternoon light stretched across the Hope House grounds, elongated and forgiving. Jesus, standing by the old oak tree near the gate, observed as Linda departed, and Michael remained still, eyes closed, face turned towards the sun. In that quiet interval, something unseen shifted between them. A boundary established not from animosity, but from mutual respect. It wasn't absolution, not yet, but it was the unvarnished truth, finally voiced. And sometimes, that's the genesis of a new start. The springtime in San Antonio possessed a peculiar gentleness. The atmosphere carried the fragrance of damp soil and blossoms of jasmine. The city, which had once felt like a formidable adversary, now seemed to murmur, "You've navigated this far." Several months had elapsed since that afternoon spent in the visitors' lounge at Hope House. It was the day Michael finally articulated all that had weighed him down. Since that pivotal moment, a quiet, profound transformation had begun to unfold, akin to the first restorative breath after being submerged. He was no longer the youth who had been expelled. He had become the young man who returned. At school, he had started assisting the guidance counselor in coordinating supplementary learning sessions for students who were struggling academically. His initial charge was a freshman named Leo, who presented as small, visibly apprehensive, and remarkably reticent. Michael recognized himself in the boy's despondent posture and vacant gaze. "Math is a real drag, huh?" Michael quipped, settling into the seat beside him. Leo offered a shrug. "I'm just not smart enough for it," Michael offered a subtle smile. "You're not unintelligent. You're simply attempting to absorb knowledge while shouldering an excessive burden." It echoed the sentiments Jesus had once imparted to him, albeit in different phraseology. And as Leo's eyes, a mixture of uncertainty and nascent curiosity, lifted, Michael experienced a novel sensation, the compelling force of purpose. At Hope House, Alejandra had also observed the discernible change. Michael now volunteered for household duties without prompting, offered guidance to the younger residents, and had taken to maintaining a whiteboard in the communal area that proclaimed, "A single act of kindness can salvage a day, perhaps even a life." Initially, the other adolescents playfully teased him about it, but before long, they began appending their own messages beneath his. Small annotations of hope. "You possess greater fortitude than you realize. Do not surrender before the dawn. We are in this together." That whiteboard evolved into the collective pulse of the residents, a daily affirmation of optimism. One evening, Alejandra discovered Michael diligently repainting an aged wooden bench near the entry. "You've been quite industrious," she remarked with a smile. He gave a nod, absently wiping a smudge of paint from his cheek. "Yes, I'm just endeavoring to make this place reflect its true nature. A commencement, not a conclusion." Alejandra observed him thoughtfully. "You realize," she stated, "most individuals your age are eager to put this place behind them." Michael looked up, his expression serene, yet resolute. "Perhaps that is precisely why I must remain." By summertime, he was officially integrated into the Hope House Peer Mentorship Initiative, dedicating his afternoons to assisting new arrivals. Young individuals emerging from tumult, bearing the identical expression he once carried: distrust, exhaustion, silence. When a 14-year-old named Eli arrived, his visible contusions concealed beneath his hooded garment, and a narrative too harrowing to recount, Michael refrained from pressure. He simply sat beside him on the bunk bed one night and softly said, "You don't have to speak. Just consume something first. All else can wait." It mirrored the patience Jesus had demonstrated to him that night in the park. Days later, Eli discreetly slipped a folded note beneath Michael's door. Inside, penned in an unrefined script, it read, "Thank you for not asking what transpired. Thank you for staying." Michael held the note for an extended period. It felt akin to a prayer answered. Not the kind that rectifies your past, but the sort that imbues it with significance. A few weeks hence, the staff extended an invitation for him to address a local youth engagement forum. Standing on a platform clad in a borrowed blazer, his palms slick with apprehension, Michael surveyed a gathering of adolescents, some restless, some in pain, some captivated by his every utterance. "I once believed survival entailed fleeing," he commenced. "But I discovered that genuine resilience stems from persevering, from transforming the experiences that shattered you into instruments that aid others in their healing." His voice gained steadiness as he spoke of Hope House, of compassion, and of a man in white who had materialized during his darkest hour. "He did not mend everything," Michael conveyed. "He simply sat with me, and that was sufficient to embark anew." As he stepped down from the dais, the applause registered not as mere sound, but as validation. A collective resonance from countless lives quietly affirming, "Me too." That evening, back in his quarters, Michael reopened his journal. On a fresh page, he inscribed, "I used to question why the divine permitted me to suffer. Now I comprehend he was instructing me how to perceive the anguish of others, how to walk alongside them." He closed the volume, exhaled, and directed his gaze toward the window, where moonlight cascaded across the floorboards. Somewhere beyond the confines, a man attired in a simple white tunic passed by the entrance to Hope House. Pausing momentarily before continuing his sojourn down the thoroughfare, Jesus found no need to detain his former protege. The boy he had encountered in the park was no longer adrift. He had evolved into the beacon that others would emulate in finding their way home. Darkness had enveloped San Antonio, cloaking the city in a soft, amber hush. From the rooftop of Hope House, the urban panorama gleamed like scattered cinders, minute fragments of luminescence, defiant in their refusal to be consumed by the night. Michael Carter leaned against the balustrade, the evening breeze caressing his hair, carrying the faint drone of traffic and the distant echoes of children's laughter from within the residence. 5 years had elapsed since that night in Travis Park, the night he encountered an individual who identified himself as Jesus and assured him he was not isolated. Now 22 years of age, Michael was no longer an occupant. He had become a counselor, the youngest in the entire history of Hope House. His office still retained the aroma of fresh paint and coffee, its walls adorned with sketches and correspondence from the young people he had guided. Each one, he mused, served as a tangible reminder that fractured narratives can indeed discover a new trajectory. Within the building, merriment emanated from the kitchen. Eli, the boy once shy and bearing concealed bruises, was now actively participating in dinner service, bantering cheerfully as he navigated with a platter of spaghetti. Val had commenced her university studies and returned each weekend to lend her support. Even Louise, The adolescent who had previously vowed never to place faith in another adult was now pursuing a career in social work. They had forged a kinship, not through lineage, but through shared resilience. Alejandra observed from the doorway, a faint smile gracing her lips. "You've done well, kid," she whispered to herself. Michael had meticulously reconstructed that which had once salvaged him, not merely in tangible structures or sleeping accommodations, but in spirit. Hope House was no longer merely a sanctuary. It had transformed into a haven for second opportunities, the kind of environment where personal suffering no longer dictated an individual's identity. Later that evening, as the last vestiges of daylight receded, Michael found himself returning to Travis Park, the very location where his own journey had commenced. The bench remained, weathered yet robust, situated beneath a tree that had visibly grown since that fateful night. He sat, his fingers tracing the worn iron of the armrest. The city had undergone transformation, yet this particular spot felt ageless, almost hallowed. From the enveloping shadows, a man experiencing homelessness shuffled past, murmuring softly to himself, his eyes etched with weariness. Without hesitation, Michael reached into his pocket, retrieving a sandwich from the paper bag he carried. "Hey, man," he said gently, extending it. "You should eat something." The man hesitated, then accepted the offering, his voice raspy. "Why are you helping me?" Michael responded with the same smile that had once been bestowed upon him. "Because someone helped me when I was in need." The man's expression shifted from bewilderment to gratitude, and he offered a soft, "God bless you," before moving away towards the distant lights. Michael watched him depart, the words resonating within him. He gazed upwards at the vast, unyielding expanse of the Texas night sky stretching above. The stars twinkled faintly, and for a fleeting moment, a familiar warmth permeated the atmosphere, akin to the echo of a voice carried on the breeze. "You are more resilient than you imagine, Michael, and you are never alone." He closed his eyes, and the intervening years seemed to compress. The rain, the hunger, the despair, all of it now distant, softened by an infusion of grace. Weeks later, Hope House proudly hosted its 10th anniversary celebration. The gymnasium buzzed with the energy of numerous families, dedicated volunteers, and countless young individuals whose lives had been positively impacted by the program. At the forefront of the stage stood Michael, his tie slightly askew, a subtle smile playing at the corner of his lips. "When I was 17, he began, his voice unwavering, "I believed my narrative had concluded the night I was forced from my home. However, it transpired that was merely the prologue. I encountered someone who conveyed to me that affection manifests not through dramatic displays or miraculous interventions, but in the simple commitment to persevere." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembly, where young people clutched paper cups of punch, mothers discreetly wiped away tears, and volunteers stood with evident pride. "And now," he continued, "it is our collective responsibility to remain for those who are still navigating their own profound darkness. Because here in Texas, or anywhere in this world, no one deserves to confront the night in solitude." The assembled audience erupted in applause, some visibly moved to tears, others smiling through their watery eyes. Alejandra observed from her vantage point in the front row, her hands clasped in silent supplication. Above them, through the gymnasium's open skylight, the first star emerged. It gleamed with exceptional brilliance, a silent testament, perhaps, that somewhere beyond, the man in white continued his silent vigil, walking the streets, observing and whispering, I am still present. As the illumination dimmed and the echoes of applause subsided, Michael descended from the stage, his heart replete, understanding that his story was no longer defined by hardship. It was now a testament to purpose, a purpose that had the capacity to multiply exponentially. For when one soul discovers its light, 1,000 others can subsequently follow. If this narrative has resonated with your spirit, remember that grace continues to traverse among us, often appearing in the most unassuming faces on the quietest of nights. Subscribe to Light Within Stories for further authentic accounts of faith, hope, and redemption that serve as a poignant reminder that no one is ever truly isolated.